All right, let's take a look at what's happening this closing February week. This week we have Mars direct trine to the Sun, we have a Pisces new moon, we have Venus stationing retrograde, and Saturn entering the last decan of Pisces. New stuff for Saturn. That's nice. Let's take a look at our Monday. As always, Monday is the moon's day. This is February 24th. The moon is waning. She is in Aquarius, out of element, peregrine, in Venus's decan, and Mercury's terms, moving towards a Pluto conjunction. This one is very peculiar because the moon is kind of not really doing much. Later in the day, she'll be a little better because she'll be in between Venus and Jupiter. But the day kind of starts in this spooky space with Pluto. And of course, it's Pluto in Aquarius, so we're really wrestling with a lot of the big changes that are happening in the world, especially in regards to technology, in regards to governance, and all things along those lines. So this is what I have in the image for today. The moon just hiding away from our television. She does not want to look at it. She is tired. And I think that really kind of builds up on this idea of the moon being enclosed by the benefics later in the day. We kind of go from this spooky place. We really just don't want to look at it. And so we try to find an outlet to escape from. Venus is getting ready for retrograde. Jupiter's still really slow. So like a lot of those good things might be unreliable at best. Might be just kind of like a bit of a band-aid to our problems. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot that can be gained there. I think, if anything, taking a step back from all of that news and all of that noise can actually be really helpful today to curb some of this Moon-Pluto vibe. And it's for that reason that I gave today a 4 difficulty score and a 1 utility score. I think that the difficulty is the overwhelm of the Moon-Pluto conjunction, and it can be really rough to start the week on such a note. And the utility of today is in just kind of like taking a step back from all that stuff, really removing yourself from it. The moon really will be kind of close to the benefics really towards the end of the day, and so it's best to kind of just play it easy today. But with that, let's take a look at Tuesday. Tuesday, as always, is Mars's day. This is February 25th, and Mars is now in Cancer, direct, which is really nice, not retrograde anymore, fallen in his own element in Mercury's decan and terms, soon receiving a trine from the Sun. The trines from the Sun, especially for Mars and all the planets above Mars, usually are the station markers. Usually you get a trine to the Sun when you're stationing retrograde and another trine to the Sun when you're stationing direct. And this is kind of what's happening here. So in the image, I just have Mars looking up into the sky. The sky is red and bright and just beautiful. He's all armored and suited up, and it's feeling really good. Because I feel like the trine to the Sun, especially this the station direct trine, can really be like the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, we finally arrived. I can finally just move on. I can finally just move forward without any sort of roadblock or any sort of revision or any sort of thing like that. Like, everything that had to be revised has been revised. Now I just get to move forward with this thing. And I think that that's very much the sense of today. Throughout February, I had this special limited edition reading session that was all about the Mars retrograde. And what I heard a lot from my clients is just that, like, they felt like this anger and this frustration was just so stifled, and they wanted to continue stifling because they didn't know what to do, and they wanted to just like blow it up in all sorts of directions. And I feel like this can be like that really nice breath of fresh air of like, nice. I actually am able to let this energy go somewhere, whether it's yelling at somebody, whether it is punching a fucking punch bag, or it's going to the gym or running or doing something that will just really get those Mars juices pumping. Whatever it is, it can now happen. It can now happen in a more reliable way. Mars is still fallen in Cancer, which dictates that a lot of this aggression is still more for defensive purposes, I guess. But nonetheless, it's really good to have Mars in his own element and now moving forward once and for all. But it's for those reasons that I settled at a 2.5 evenly today, both in difficulty and utility. I think the difficulty is in still being in Cancer, still being fallen, still being where you are. But the utility is that you will be there sooner rather than later. So yes, forward motion is great. And some of the signs that might really start to feel that are Aries, Cancer, Leo, and Scorpio. Now, moving on to February 26th, this is Mercury's day and also New Moon Day. We have Mercury in Pisces, insect, out of element, and Mars is decan in terms, recently departing from a Saturn conjunction while moving towards a Neptune and North Node conjunction. Last week I talked about how Mercury can be a little lost in the sauce in Pisces. But last week we actually kind of lucked out because we had Mercury and Jupiter collaborating in Pisces to a certain degree. So Mercury had a little bit more direction. But now after coming from a Saturn conjunction and moving towards a Neptune conjunction and a North Node conjunction, this really doesn't look as exciting for Mercury. It can look as muddied and confusing as it has ever gotten. Like a North Node Neptune conjunction is confusing, but a North Node and Neptune and Mercury, and let's throw Saturn in there as well, is definitely a recipe for unclear messaging. And so in the image for today, I just have Lady Mercury walking into the waters of Pisces, kind of just like taking a bath to try and cleanse some of that confusion out. Mercury does not seem stoked on life right now, and it's kind of this pensive and reflective moment. I was almost envisioning Mercury kind of trying to see her image in the waters, but never being able to quite understand who they are. So yeah, confusing, muddied, loss kind of a day. And it's for that reason that I give today a 4 difficulty and a 1 utility. The difficulty is just how confusing things can be. If you're trying to do something that requires precision and clarity, today's not your day. But the utility of today, it's still a 1 utility because despite everything, Jupiter and Mercury are still under a mutual reception of sorts. They're in each other's signs, and that's enough to give a bit of a utility for the day. We just have to think about some of the help that we might have gotten last week to be able to navigate the incoming week in some ways. Some of the signs that really should pay attention to that though are Gemini, Virgo, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Moving on to Thursday, this is February 27th, it's Jupiter's day. Jupiter is in Gemini in detriment in his element, and Mars is decan in his own terms, receiving the new moon through a square. So the new moon really happened yesterday, but then now the moon moves towards Jupiter and is received in Pisces. That's great for everybody. As far as like the world goes, having a new moon received by Jupiter, especially in Pisces, can just give us empathy and compassion and all these Pisces keywords, if you will. It can be like, we understand each other, we're trying to help each other more and all sorts of things. But that's great for everybody, but what about Jupiter? That was my question around today. The biggest thing about this is that Jupiter is being overcome by all the things that are in Pisces right now. And if you don't know what being overcome is in astrology, is that everything's rising first. So it's like the thing that Jupiter has to help is kind of like moving ahead of Jupiter. So it's almost like Jupiter's trying to catch up to the thing that it's trying to help as it's moving along and kind of just going and doing its own thing. So it's more about Jupiter repairing some of the damage rather than Jupiter actually being able to set up a nice path or a route for everything that's in Pisces. So this is why in the image I have Jupiter kind of like it's Jupiter's helpline. This is kind of how I was envisioning this image. Just Jupiter kind of like picking up everybody's calls and trying to help everybody as he is trying to also do his own thing. Jupiter has his eyes closed in the image. He's kind of looking a little tired and worn out, but Jupiter is now in action. I think it's important to note that Jupiter has moved a degree for the first time since the station. So really, Jupiter's starting to pick up speed, starting to move forward, and starting to do new things. But today can be a little stressy just because he also has to tend to everybody else's needs. And I think that is a bit of the challenge of today. I gave today a 3 difficulty and a 3 utility. I think the difficulty is in trying to help everybody, but I think the utility is actually maybe being able to, especially now that Jupiter has taken its first step forward and it's kind of like feeling a lot better about himself. But on that note, some signs I should be focusing on today are Cancer, Leo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Now moving on to our Friday, it is February 28th, Venus's day. Venus is in Aries, out of element, in detriment, stationed in the sun's decan and her own terms. Nice. I love this image, especially as a follow-up to last week's image. And if you remember last week, Venus was herself holding the torch. It's not like Venus was set on fire. She brought fire upon herself. And with this image, I was almost envisioning this idea of the phoenix, which is technically not so much of an Aries sort of archetype, I guess, but I'll roll with it. It's fire and it's pretty, so it's Venus. But I think my idea around that was just Venus is setting herself on fire, not literally. Do not do that. But kind of renewing herself in that process as well. Because of course, whenever we have a Venus retrograde, we also will have a Venus cazimi, which is Venus at the heart of the sun, and Venus kind of like being renewed as a morning star now, and she will be much more active and much more of a go-getter. So this idea of Venus going back and grabbing something for herself that maybe she let go for the sake of another is very much in play now. Venus is very much kind of going through this process of transformation where she's going from this place of being Aphrodite, the goddess of love, to Aphrodite, the goddess of war in many ways. And I don't say that to alarm everybody's like, oh, war could ensue, and in some cases, like, isn't it always? But I think that the big thing for right now is more so this idea of conquering one's desires. And I think that Venus is very much moving towards that direction. But yes, it's for that reason that I gave today a 3.5 difficulty and a 2 utility. I think the difficulty of the day is kind of just really feeling that, oh shit, Venus retrograde, where's the love? But then the utility of today is like, I know where the love is. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get it. So go and do that. And I think that some of the signs that will really feel that today are Aries, Taurus, and Libra. All right, we come to March 1st. It's Saturn's day. Saturn is in Pisces, out of element, peregrine, Mars is decan and terms, moving towards a Neptune conjunction. This one is really cool because this is the first time that we're actually seeing new stuff for Saturn in Pisces. We've been in the first 2 decans for a really long time, and that retrograde really kind of stuck us in the middle decan of Pisces. So now to be in the 3rd, we're really kind of beginning to see the conclusion to that story. Now Saturn is also a lot closer to Neptune. If you watched our Neptune horoscope, this is a really big deal, and I would recommend watching that somewhere up here if you haven't already. But really the big idea that I was having for this is that Saturn is kind of almost at the gates of Aries. We're going to get Saturn in Aries really quick from here on out. I always find that part of Pisces to be very decisive. It's kind of the end of the zodiac and kind of just coming to terms with what must end, what cannot go on. If we are to be happy and if we are to reach this level of Piscean idealism, a lot of stuff needs to go. And so Saturn here's at the gates of the cave that will eventually lead her into Aries. But I really kind of almost have the sense that this is a point of no return for the Saturnians and for maybe people who are having their Saturn returns, or for some people who are who really resonate with Saturn in the sense that the story that we're currently telling is really wrapping itself up. And by summer this year, and more solidly by 2026, we'll be in a totally different world. And so I think that this is very much this cave. It's like this unknown red light coming from there, which is Mars, of course. But I think that we very much also cannot afford to continue in Pisces if we think about how hard it's been for Saturn in Pisces, being peregrine and kind of just lost. Aries is definitely a bit of an upgrade because Saturn really enjoys some of the heat that fire signs can provide. It can really give Saturn a sense of determination despite Saturn still being fallen in Aries. But I think that with that might come rough beginnings, but beginnings nonetheless, and a sense of newness. We're not quite there yet, but this is the entryway into that transitory period, if you will. And it's for that reason that I gave today a 3.5 difficulty and a 2 utility. I think the 3.5 difficulty really lies on the unknown, or in the finality that can come with that last decan of Pisces. But the utility also kind of similar to Venus is in embracing that sort of like, I'm tired of being lost. I know that going to this new place might be difficult, but what can I do to maybe make that a little bit easier for myself? I think these are really important questions that will be sitting with as Saturn gets ready to change signs later in the year. Some of the signs that should really pay attention to this are, of course, Capricorn and Aquarius, which are ruled by Saturn, but also Pisces, because Saturn is in Pisces. All right, now closing our week, it's March 2nd, 2025. It is the Sun's day. The Sun is in Pisces, out of element, peregrine in Jupiter's decan in terms and overcoming Jupiter through a square. So I talked about this Monday when Jupiter received a moon, and now Jupiter is receiving the sun, which is really nice. So this new moon weekend is really bookended by both luminaries kind of really getting a lot of help from Jupiter. But like I said, Jupiter is not entirely able to help much right now. But if we really sit and compare and contrast both Saturn's journey through Pisces through those same degrees and now Sun's journey through those same degrees, we'll see that Jupiter is a lot more able to help, especially because the sun is a lot faster and it doesn't have to like really sit with all of that stuff for that much time. So in the image I have the sun in this boat kind of just like rowing away. Last week we had the sun at the shores, it saw a beacon, and I imagine that today the sun is kind of like moving toward that beacon. But then of course it is through a square, and of course the sun is overcoming Jupiter. The sun is ahead of Jupiter, and Jupiter's just trying to catch up to the sun to give it some help. And so a lot of the help that's coming is just like, it's kind of like the good to haves as opposed to like the really nice thing. As you can see in the image, the sun is not on a nice little boat, kind of just carrying him into Pisces and kind of settling him into like this nice little groove. It's this cacophonous wave that's going in all sorts of directions. And the sun, it has a boat full of lemons. It's got stuff to eat. It's got some nutrients. It's got some vitamin C, I guess. At the same time, I'm not sure that lemons are all that the sun needs to survive right now. But at least it's better than nothing when life gives you lemons, I guess. But on that note, it's for that reason that I gave today 2.5 difficulty and a 3.5 utility, actually. I think the difficulty can just be the cacophony of it. Jupiter's still in Gemini, so it might be tossed in all sorts of directions. But the utility is in 1, being on having that help, 2, being able to move very swiftly through some of these difficulties, and 3, making some lemonade, I guess. And some of the signs that should be paying attention to today are Leo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. But all right, with that, this is our week. Let's take a quick look at our week at a glance. It looks like our difficulty and utility is beginning to spread apart a little bit. Last week we had our averages a little bit closer to each other, but today we have a 3.5 difficulty and a 2 utility on average for the week. And I think that's just the Venus retrograde and the Mercury stuff kind of really crimping the style of the week, along with Monday, Moon, Pluto, cacophony. So I think that the best day for today is really kind of just, let's all rely on the Jupiter hotline. It feels like that's the thing to do on Thursday. But then Sunday also seems to have really good potential. But this is it, guys. I am Joe G, and you can find me at themercuryrising.com. And if you'd like some specific insights about your zodiac sign this week, I have the link in the description. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter to get it sent to you every week along with these videos. So you're just like super prepared for what the week has to offer. But with that, this has been it, guys. I will see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.